Hello, Shanghai Art Spotlight people. I'm Lorenzo Balbi, the curator of Giorgio Morandi Solo exhibition at MAP, Museum of Art in Pudong. Giorgio Morandi Solo is a challenge because the MAP, the Museum of Art in Pudong, they ask us to think about a comprehensive solo exhibition of Morandi practice and work for the audience in China and in Shanghai in particular. And the idea from the curatorial team was to shape the biggest Morandi exhibition ever made abroad. So putting together more than 140 works coming mainly from the Morandi Museum in Bologna, in Italy. The main museums in Italy and abroad having Morandi pieces, like the Tate Modern in London, Thyssen-Bornemisza, a lot of private collection and foundations, because Morandi is very now recognized and famous in China, and also it started to be collected in the last decade. So there are some pieces in the exhibition also coming from Chinese collectors. But I'm honored to say that more than 120 pieces here in the exhibition were never shown before in China. So I hope that they will be also a surprise for the Chinese audience. Solo, why this word? Just one word, just 4 letters. So the idea was even from the title, give the audience and the people coming to the show an idea of Morandi practice and life. Morandi was solo, alone in Italian, in his apartment, in his house, with the 3 sisters. None of them get married, none of them had children. They spent their entire life together. And Morandi was leaving his space, his small studio, when his objects, alone. No one was allowed to go in his studio. There's no one having seen the Morandi painting or working as an artist. So he was looking for a space for meditation, a space for reflecting, a space of making art alone, solo. And also solo, of course, is because Morandi is unique. His practice is really unique. He was attracted by different waves of the European art field, like Cubofuturism, Metaphysica, but he never went into one of those avant-gardes. He really wanted to develop something unique, alone, solo, something that could be a solo presentation of his life. He could not just follow a group, follow something. His practice is really unique. And then the last thing is also having a quote on like the musical word assolo. So making an assolo, making something that also, making an exhibition is always also a possibility to go in deep with the research, to go in deep with the knowledge of a specific expression of art. So in this case, Morandi is doing an assolo, is doing something alone, is doing something for the public, with a special attention on the link in between his practice and the Asian and Chinese culture. This is the largest exhibition, Morandi exhibition of the century, and the challenges was like moving those work from Europe mainly to China, which was also a challenge in putting them together, because it was not just a question of number. It was a question of selecting specific work in order to give to the audiences a in-deep approach to the Morandi practice. So, for example, we reproduce here a still life by Morandi, and so we wanted to have this specific still life together with the drawing with the same subject. So the exhibition is really tailor-made on the map, on the Museum of Art in Pudong for the spaces, but it's also made with a strong selection of, we selected some specific work to be isolated in the journey of the exhibition, but also we made some coherent sections on specific thematic or periods or subjects of Morandi practice. There's also some legend around Morandi. So Morandi being a kind of monk isolated in his apartment. I disagree about this. I mean, Morandi, of course, Morandi had a specific way of living, a specific way of doing art, but he was not a monk. He was a very well-connected artist, living its period, being in touch with all the thinkers and art historians and other artists of his age. He was super well informed about what was happening in his time in the other part of the world and what the other artists were doing. But then he took a distance from being in the mainstream system, for being in the art events, in the art field. He decided to be retired from those ambient, from those environment, and to build and defend his proper environment. He had these needs of being alone, of being in his, and to take time to do that. And that's why it's for me very important also to show Morandi today, because it's a reflection about time and the fact of keeping and cutting your time in your life to do what you want and you have to do. And this is what he was doing during his life. He was cutting the time from openings and traveling for the art world and having the time for the thing that was the important thing for him, so spending time with his object, doing his painting in his house, in his environment. And I think that this is a very contemporary, but Morandi teaches us how important it is to give the time to the important things. And I find this also a link on Eastern cultures and Chinese culture, which is not just a direct link on which is real, because we know that Morandi was looking at Chinese art of the history. He had many books in his studio of Chinese painting from the past, so he was looking at that. But it's mainly a question of how he was contemplating and meditating and using the time to produce new work. And this is why I think it's so popular and important in China. You have to know that Morandi was famous, was a very famous artist even when he was alive. Different prizes, he was selected for the Venice Biennale. He won the first prize for the painting in the prestigious São Paulo Biennale in 1957. He was used to take even 2 years to do a painting when a collector asked for a painting for him. So he was a very well-known artist, and also the other artists. He was in touch with Osvaldo Licini and Carrà mainly, like friendship, but then he was in dialogue with many of the main characters of the art history, Italian art history of the period. He was member of juries, and so it was a very important person in the art system. But then always he didn't want to go to the main event. He didn't want to appear, and that was kind of controversial. And everybody knew him. He was always this tall guy, slim, tall guy, quiet and silent guy in the back of photographs. But then he was present. There are amazing photographs of him going to the Venice Biennale and other paintings of the period. And he was always this tall guy in the back with this presence. And also his art. But then mainly he spent his time in Bologna, in Via Fondazza, and in Grizzana, in the countryside, and for the summer. And when they invited him to go to, over the borders, he never went. So, for example, his link to the French painter, to the French tradition, so to the French art, especially with Cézanne. But then this link was mainly on books, on black and white reproduction, on magazines, but he never went to Paris. So it's also interesting how those shapes and those links were made. Giorgio Morandi solo at MAP in Shanghai tried to make a complete journey around Morandi practices, so putting together more than 140 works, exploring all the thematics by Morandi, and which we can summarize in 4 thematics, so still lifes, landscapes, flowers, and few portraits, illustrating them through the different techniques by Morandi. Again, we can summarize them in 4 points: oil on canvases, drawings, watercolors, and etchings. So the exhibition was put together even taking care of representing all the techniques, all the subjects, and in the different periods. So combining still lifes, landscapes, flowers from different periods, in order to let the audience understand how the Morandi practice developed in the time. And exceptionally, thanks to the fact that we organized the exhibition together with the Museo Morandi in Bologna, we could also add some original objects coming from the studio. So letting the people understand the feeling of the domestic place of the studio of Morandi, how it was used to put together the compositions, reproducing the exact composition with the original paintings, being testimonies of the links in between Morandi and other artists, trying to give to the audience the possibility to have an overall view on how Morandi was intended to be an artist, and how Morandi was one of the first artists in the art history to shift the point of attention from the art pieces and the process of making them. So in this way, being one of the first contemporary artists. This is the still life, which is known as the Vitali 985, because you have to know that Morandi, also with titles, was very coherent. So he just made 3 titles: still lives, flowers, landscapes. So to understand which one we are talking about, we need to refer at the Catalogue Raisonné with the numbers of the Catalogue Raisonné. And this one is one of the most important work ever made. One of the masterpieces in the show is the Vitali 985 from the collection of Museo Morandi in Bologna. It was used as the cover of the Giorgio Morandi Metropolitan show in 2008. And actually, this is a very coherent composition. You see the line of the horizon, which is the line of the table, and it's putting together objects in his studio with bottles, and bottles filled with plaster, because he was used to fill the bottle with plaster in order for them not to reflect the light and to become a kind of pure form and pure colors. And here on the left you see this yellow bottle, which is an extraordinary object. It's one of the few precious bottles he ever painted. It's a Byzantine archaeological piece he bought in an antiquarium. Thanks to the display made by Aldo Cibic, Italian architect living in Shanghai, we decided to build this balcony, which is reproducing the exact balcony of the Morandi studio with the same height. And on this wall, we put some of the landscape taken by Morandi from his studio. So are images of the courtyard of Via Frondazza, when you can even see how precise was Morandi painting, the exact light and composition and view from the Morandi studio. So we decided to do a specific section with watercolors, and especially about watercolors of the last period of the life by Morandi, so in the 50s and 60s. Morandi was well known for an artist using etching, and also he was used to teach etchings, and he teach etchings from 1930 to 1956. But then, and in the last part of his life, he was losing his view, his possibility to see, and of course, to do etching, you need to be very precise. And so the gesture needs a specific and perfect view. So he started more and more using watercolors, using this fluid and liquid palette. But here you see more and more precisely how his painting became more fluid and ephemeral, going in a more and more specific abstraction. So one of Morandi's favorite subject was flowers, especially flower in vases. And here, exceptionally for this exhibition at MAP in Shanghai, we reproduce the exact composition with the original object coming from Morandi's studio. So this vase and this bunch of fake flowers, because of course real flowers are not a good object for Morandi, because real flowers, they change day by day, second by second, because of the light, because they are alive. So they change second by second. So he was starting to use fake flowers, like those textile silk flowers, because they are fixed, their volumes, their light, they could be pure form. And so in this way we tried to reproduce a kind of environment inside Morandi's studio with this object on the table and how it was represented by the artist. Even to help the visitors and the audience to understand better the way Morandi was attracted on specific object, we decided to dedicate specific section to specific objects. And for example, this white bottle is the protagonist, its main character of one section. And this bottle is really his beloved bottle. He made more than 100 paintings on this object, mixing it together with other objects, or like in this case, quite alone, like a portrait, a real portrait of an object. Is a specific object, probably. I think there's no like a specific reason. This is something that really appears studying Morandi and studying how many paintings were dedicated to this object. I think that he was attracted by the form of it. The fact that this sinuosity of the form, it became a kind of body. And so he was really attracted by the form and how it combines with light, making anytime different shadows and possibility on the table.